If you want to know the true definition of bias and bending points in order to fit what you want to believe, this is the perfect video. Watch this.
Located on the southern tip of the Sahara Desert, the Empire of Mali was one of the largest empires in West African history, and at its height, it spanned from the Atlantic coast to central parts of the Sahara Desert. The empire was founded in 1235 and lasted until the early 1600s. All goods brought in and out of the empire were heavily taxed, while all gold nuggets belonged to the king. Mali's ruler adopted the title of Mansa, and the empire's most famous ruler was named Mansa Musa, who underwent a pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324, accompanied by 60,000 individuals and large quantities of gold. Chroniclers of the times wrote that he distributed so much gold on his trip that he caused great inflation lasting a decade. He was credited with building the Great Mosque of Timbuktu in 1327, as well as the greatest library in Africa at the time, estimated to have housed between 250,000 and 700,000 manuscripts, making it the largest library in Africa since the Great Library of Alexandria.
So far, no problems. Here he's depicting one of the greatest civilizations in Africa. So I don't disagree with anything that he said. But let's wait for the other shoe to drop.
There's been some controversy over the ethnicity and racial appearance of Mansa Musa,
And here we go, right on time.
with the most common version coming from a 1375 Catalan atlas on the right. On the left is a 1339 depiction from the map of Angelino Dulcar. It's clear that one of these depictions has been altered.
Since the claim is that one of these has been altered, I think it's important for us to check both maps. The Catalan Atlas is probably one of the most famous atlases, and it's incredible for its accuracy at the time and understanding different complexities of different nations. Angelina Dulca, as you will see as I show you his map, is, how do I say this? Amateur at best. And almost everyone is portrayed as a blonde white person. This being probably a result of someone who had limited information. For example, this is the Queen of Sheba, and as you can tell, Sheba had been dead for a while, and she's being portrayed as like a white person. This map is okay. It's not the worst thing I've ever seen, but it's not accurate, especially when it comes to the figures on it. The Khan at the top is also portrayed as a white person, and we know that Khans are Asian. We can tell that these atlases were both done with the same intention in mind, but one has been rectified in order to fit the people and where they were. And of course, it utilizes people like the Queen of Sheba and the Three Magi and all this other stuff in order to portray conventional religious figurines, in order to show people this is this place, this is that place, this is that place. But the first one shows the Mansa Musa too high on the map, which is replaced later by an Arab, and Mansa Musa is put lower in West Africa. You can tell there in the two images that Mansa Musa is put too high, and Mansa Musa was portrayed as a white guy in the old one because they had limited information. When they got more information, they turned him into a black guy as he really is. Who do you think blackwashed this image? Do you think it was black people who went to Europe and changed it? Or was it people accurately portraying something that they had inaccurately portrayed in the past? The map is also very detailed in its stories and travels, and you can see here that there's an understanding that he's a African king surrounded by Muslims, and he's got Muslim intentions. As you can see, caravans and all kinds of stuff that depict him with his people. And of course, on this side, it shows the Queen of Sheba, a Christian relic, or a Christian deity, Christian whatever. And then you got ships and Arabia and Asia and the portrayal of trade routes and tents, a lot of literature as well to try and tell people what's going on. This map is very accurate, and the people who did this were rectifying what was there in the previous one, which there was lack of it. In fact, I think a whole school started because of that first one, meaning that there wasn't that much to go with it, but then the importance of the map was there. Now, the old map, I'm not even saying that those guys were trying to whitewash anything. They actually were just ignorant. And then later on, became more savvy, more true to the world about what was actually happening. And this guy is using their ignorance as an excuse to turn Mansa Musa into a white guy, which I can understand why. After years of people trying to portray Egyptians as white people, and then now spinning and realizing there's other great civilizations in Africa, they have to do what they always did, which is try to destroy or deny their existence by switching their races. This was done in Great Zimbabwe as well. There is no reason to even believe that Mansa Musa was anything but a black guy. And using one image, knowing that there's even one that contradicts, come on.
Which seems to be the case with many early Arab and Islamic images of Moors, who are white Berbers but have been blackwashed in an effort to appropriate history for seemingly political purposes. For example, this image from 1285 shows a Christian and a Moor playing chess.
This is a very sneaky tactic that he's using. It's true that the image that he shows at the top is not to be found in the book of Alfonso called The Book of Games and Chess, where he depicts Muslims and Christians engaged in chess. But this attempt to try and make the image that is probably a forgery of those black dudes playing chess. I'm not saying it's fake. I'm not saying it is a forgery. I'm just saying I've looked into the book of Alfonso, which they claim it comes from, and I can't see it. But all I'm saying is, what does that have to do with Mansa Musa? Mansa Musa is in the heart of Africa. This thing is in Spain. And like I said, I'm not saying that that image is fake. I'm just saying I've looked into the book and I'm looking at it right now, and I can see a shred of evidence that those black people have been portrayed in this book, and that's where it's claimed in the notes to be found when I looked it up. So okay, so there's some forgeries online forgeries. Do you know that Mansa Musa photo is not a forgery? The Mansa Musa painting was done in the same century as the other one. The Catalan Atlas is not a forgery. So what does that have to do with this modern online forgery? By the way, if anyone knows where that image comes from, please tell me in the chat, because I'm not too convinced that it's a fake. But like I said, I can't find it within its books, so I'm going to assume that it's not real. But again, what does this have to do with Mansa Musa?
This is a mural located on the ceiling of the Hall of Kings in Alhambra in Spain from the late 14th century. So, the same way that the history of the Berber Moors has been appropriated, so is the case with ancient Mali, as this is how Mansa Musa is depicted in textbooks.
This guy is dishonest to the max. This is one of the most dishonest things I've ever seen. So modern textbooks depict him as a white person. Therefore, he definitely, like, are you going to use another forgery, to try and dismiss another forgery? Clearly, Mansa Musa looked nothing like that. What are you talking about? Even in your image, if we took the image you took of the blonde person who they called Mansa Musa, clearly doesn't look like the one that you just showed. The one you just showed looks like a Greek, and he's got like black hair and he's wearing rags. The other one was like a sophisticated Arab looking person with blonde hair. What the hell?
To drive the point home, these Nubian wall murals from the 1500s are from Dongola, Sudan, located on the banks of the Nile.
To drive the point home, I'm going to pivot to another civilization that has nothing to do with Mansa Musa. Also, these Nubian murals showing Christian stuff. Yeah, they show Christians as white people, but they show themselves as black people. What is going on?
Old Dongola flourished for centuries as the capital of Makuria, one of the most important medieval African states, filled with ancient Christian iconography. During excavations, archaeologists have recently found a series of hidden rooms covered with spectacular and colorful depictions of the Virgin Mary, Jesus Christ, Archangel Michael, and a Nubian king.
Wow, that's amazing. They've got Saint Michael, Saint Maria, Saint Gabriel, Jesus, and Nubian king. Right, wait a minute. He doesn't have a crown on. Oh, that's actually Saint John. The reason why this guy is so dangerous is because he's being somewhat deceitful about this picture. So he shows some Nubian art, real Nubian art, and then he slices this Germanic temple. It's actually called the Palatine Chapel, and it's in Germany. And you see how he's being deliberately deceitful. He just slides it in there and goes, "Look, a Nubian king." No, this is not going to go past me because I'm not stupid. Other images from this. Also, did you really think that people would believe that the art of the Nubians just jumped to Renaissance art all of a sudden? It went from like sort of chalk drawings on walls and then all of a sudden it jumped to like Renaissance art. Shut up.
Ancient Nubia, known for rich deposits of gold, hosted some of Africa's earliest kingdoms, with massive amounts of slave labor, became quite wealthy, even ruling parts of Egypt for a brief time. But their pharaohs were never of sub-Saharan African descent.
Okay, it's starting to get desperate. I mean, multiple images of pharaohs show the black Nubian or Kushite kings of Egypt, and clearly they're depicted as black. Ushanhuru was the prince of the pharaoh at the time, and he looked like this. You can see him depicted with a leash on his neck. On the other side is another vassal, another king from another empire, and they're both on leashes because they've been conquered. Ushanhuru, the son of, I think it was Pie, the king of Egypt at the time, the king fled and his son was captured and his wife was captured and all these other people. And the torture that probably happened after that, you can probably imagine. But clearly they're being depicted as sub-Saharan Africans. So I don't know why he's so desperate to make the Nubians black. He even that do not forget that image that he showed from Germany where he tried to pretend that it was a Nubian image. By the way, there's a multitude of other images that I could have showed you, like these Egyptian copies made by people from the Middle East who conquered the same guys who conquered them fell in love with their culture and they copied their stuff, and this is what they depicted the ancient Egyptians like.
Despite what is taught by politically motivated universities, which no longer try to educate people, but to indoctrinate them into a false, politically motivated view of history.
After the multiple sneaky tactics you've just pulled, I don't think you're in any position to say anything about the universities.
While it is true that there are sub-Saharan African mummies, it is also true that ancient pharaohs and nobility like to be buried with their slaves to have servants in the afterlife.
My Hepri was not a slave. In fact, it's thought that he was an advisor to the king, or he was the son of a king, or a son of a lesser wife of the king. This word, the fan bearer on the right side of the king, is used usually to denote people who were viceroys of Kush. it does not denote that he was a slave who just fanned the king. He also had a bunch of other titles. This is just deception. Not to mention, when he says slaves, he shows captives of war. Those were not slaves, those were captives of war.
From the 3rd century BC to the 4th century AD, Phoenician rulers of the Kingdom of Kush controlled significant territory along the banks of the Nile, ensuring the production of significant quantities of iron, mined in large part by slave labor. The Phoenicians also mined copper in Cyprus, as well as tin in Great Britain, and even mined the best copper in Michigan, USA, which is uniquely mixed with silver.
Wow, just another blatant lie. Phoenicians were mining silver in Michigan, USA in the 3rd century BC. Yes, it's true. The Phoenicians, or whatever you want to call it, the people who took over Egypt, they did have slaves in Egypt on the banks of the Nile. Now, were they Kushites? No, they seem to have taken slaves from just about anywhere. Secondly, what's this America stuff? Where's that coming from? Just making up information.
Even ancient Ethiopia had a different ruling demographic in antiquity.
Again, this is another lie. We know the people who are ruling Ethiopia. We've got the king's lists, and they list them all as black people. In fact, Ethiopians were so in charge of their lives that they took over Yemen, and they had control of some parts of Yemen. So why do you keep making more and more stuff up? This is why I don't review this guy.
But stretched back even before the time of Christ. The ancient Ethiopian genome reveals extensive Eurasian admixture going back 4,500 years, including genetic contributions from present-day Sardinians. The famous stone-carved churches of Lalibela, Ethiopia, were said by locals to be built by blonde angels, which may sound far-fetched,
But why doubt it now? You've already believed half of this other, and there's no other word to use but crap. So why doubt it now?
starts to make sense when one considers the inside is filled with swastikas, Templar crosses inside of the Seal of Solomon, as well as double-headed eagles.
On what planet does a swastika, which is a modified cross in this case, on what planet does that start to equal blonde angels? If I showed you a swastika, would you really be like, oh, wow, a blonde angel must have left that there? What is this connection? And now he's panning through obvious African people on their statues, except for Jesus and the angels. And he shows multiple Ethiopians who do not look like white people at all. In fact, they're so dark. This is the worst thing I've ever seen.
Mansa Musa is estimated to have died in 1337 and would pass the title of Mansa to his son, leading to a period of decline, with the throne changing hands several times, mismanaged by people not from the original ruling family, until 1433, when the Empire of Mali was conquered by nomads. And by the 17th century, Mali had broken into a number of minor independent chiefdoms.
Whatever. I don't even know what I'm arguing against anymore.
There are still many cultural and esoteric mysteries surrounding the Kingdom of Mali. Many of the ancient manuscripts have been made available online, preserved for anyone to see.